three sons paid for their father to fly in a vintage fighter plane as a birthday treat only to watch him crash in a fireball, an inquest heard. Retired farmer John Marshall, 84, was given the flight in the P-51D Mustang by his sons because they knew he loved military aircraft. He enjoyed 50 minutes in the air as a passenger in the World War II plane before it got into difficulties in a crosswind while landing. The American-made plane bounced off the runway and burst into flames after hitting an oak tree at Hardwick Airfield near Norwich, Norfolk. The vintage Mustang fighter which crashed in Norfolk. Stock photo, image, East Anglia News Service. Mr. Marshall of Willoughby Waterleys, Leicestershire, died instantly from head and neck injuries on October 2, 2016, the inquest in Norwich was told. The pilot Maurice Hammond, 58, who owned the Mustang, survived the crash, but suffered burns, a broken neck, shoulder and ribs. Mr. Marshall's sons had paid for the flight as an early present for their father before his 85th birthday later in the month. Video footage of the plane coming in to land was taken by his oldest son Robert Marshall, who was watching with his brothers Chris and Philip. The film, which was played to the inquest jury, showed the plane losing control and featured the sound of swearing and one of the brothers saying, "That is going to crash." The birthday present ended in tragedy. Image, East Anglia News Service. The torn-off wing at the crash site. Image, East Anglia News Service. Robert Marshall said, "It took off as normal and he was probably gone for the best part of 50 minutes. As it came to land, it touched down and I immediately thought, that was hard. My next recollection was Chris saying, 'Run, it's going to hit yous.' It was coming straight at us." Mr. Marshall said they ran across to their other brother and turned to see the plane attempts to gain altitude. As the plane flew off course, inches from the ground, its left wheel touched the soil in a plowed field. The Mustang, nicknamed Janie, then climbed at an angle with its left wing dipped and hit an oak tree, which tore off its wing. The oak tree which the plane crashed into. Image, East Anglia News Service. The three sons got their dad a flight in the vintage plane as a birthday treat. Image, East Anglia News Service. Mr. Marshall said he saw a fireball and smoke before he ran over to the wreckage along with a handful of other people to try and help. He said, "My immediate thought was, I've to get Dad out. I jumped on the right wing, which was covered in oil. I took one look at my dad and knew he was instantly killed." He then tried to help Mr. Hammond, who was on fire and had slumped forward in the cockpit. Mr. Hammond of Suffolk, who was initially a coma and spent more than 5 weeks in hospital, was unable to recall the crash. Dog walker Cheryl Griffiths said the aircraft wreckage ended up just 50 feet in front of her. Giving evidence, she said she was walking near the airfield when she heard the Mustang's engine really roar. She said, "I thought, wow, I am in the right place to see the whole takeoff. The engine was roaring but I was surprised it was not climbing. It started to turn so it was coming straight towards me and I was still thinking, this is fantastic, and it's going to come straight over my head." Maurice Hammond pictured the pilot of the Mustang which crashed. Image, East Anglia News Service. The wreckage of the vintage Mustang fighter. Image, East Anglia News Service. She said the Mustang was flying directly at her and was only around 10 to 15 feet off the ground when its left wing dipped really violently. Miss Griffiths added, "If you were to look at a clock face I would say the wings were pointing at 10 to 4 p.m. or 5 to 5 p.m. She said after the plane hit a tree in front of her there was a huge fireball. Ms. Griffiths went on, "Because the left wing had hit the heaviest part of the tree it spun the plane and it carried on bouncing in my direction." Mr. Hammond said in a written statement, "I have no idea what went wrong on the day because I have no memory. I would imagine I would be doing everything I could to avoid an accident." He described himself as, probably, the second most experienced Mustang pilot in the country. The vintage Mustang fighter flight was a treat for Dad John Marshall. Stock photo, image, East Anglia News Service. Image, East Anglia News Service. Mr. Hammond said he bought his Mustang in 1997, and spent 4 years restoring it before he flew it for the first time in 2001. He obtained his private pilot's license in 1989 and has flown around 2,000 hours since then. He said between 800 and 1,000 hours were spent in the Mustang. His daughter Leah Young, 18, who worked at the airfield and witnessed the crash, said his father was always meticulous with his checks on the aircraft. Nicholas Dan of the Air Accidents Investigation Branch, AAIB, said there were a number of factors which made the aircraft very difficult to control. An AAIB report said there was no evidence of any aircraft system failure. Mr. Dan told the inquest that the plane was blown to the left by a crosswind, and was slightly off the airstrip center line as it came into land. Sound from the video recording suggested Mr. Hammond tried to abort the landing after the Mustang bounced twice on the ground. Mr. Dan added, "It was not able to get enough height in enough time to avoid hitting the tree. If the tree had not been there, I am sure the aircraft would have got airborne." This was a case of a number of effects that come together to make it very difficult to maintain directional control and at the same time gaining altitude in the space available. The inquest continued.